Mission time post-impact, 13 minutes. Within the cordon of the breachhead, the noses of boarding torpedoes jutted from the punctured wall like the petals of gigantic metal flowers. Protected by a ring of Terminators fighting the Genestealers, only a few hundred meters distant, Tech Marines and their serfs labored constantly to keep the squads armed and battle-ready. Lorenzo was being attended by Brother Oletio, one of the Tech Marines. The spider-like arms of Oletio's servo-harness backpack worked deftly with saws, drills and welders, repairing the damage to the radiator vents on Lorenzo's back. Sparks cascaded to the oil-stained decking, falling amongst piles of bolts and coils of cables and other detritus of repair. Valencio approached, a robed orderly fussing around him with a paint gun, respraying the Terminator's armor. He had removed his helmet, something Lorenzo had tried to do but failed, and his eyes were bright with pride.
Our brothers are deciphering the CAT data now,
Valencio said.
They seem very pleased. As well they should,
said Lorenzo.
We need all the information we can gather if we are to be victorious. Our brothers fight bravely and do the chapter honor,
said Valencio.
I hope that I have acquitted myself with equal glory.
Lorenzo did not reply immediately, pondering whether to indulge Valencio's need for validation. He relented, remembering how eager he had been when he had joined the First Company. To be acknowledged as a veteran was a tribute and not to be taken lightly, and in truth, Valencio deserved praise.
You fought bravely and with skill. Many thanks for your words,
said Valencio with a deferential nod of the head.
I wish only to serve the memories of those that came before us.
Dark thoughts swirled into Lorenzo's mind. Recollections of the 950 who had been lost. He pushed the memories back into the depths of his mind, suppressing them as he had done for 6.5 centuries.
We will rejoin the battle shortly,
the sergeant said.
Make sure the others are ready.
Valencio nodded and moved away, leaving Lorenzo to his thoughts.
That is the best that I can do,
said Oletio, the servo arms folding into place behind him.
There's nothing I can do about the helm. It's jam solid, and I don't have the tools needed to release it.
Your efforts do you credit,
Lorenzo said reflexively. He had all but forgotten the Tech Marine's presence. The sergeant lifted his arms, while a pair of serfs attached chunky Stormbolter magazines to his belt.
Others are in more need of your attention.
May the strength of the angel fill your spirit,
said Oletio before turning away, his orderlies trailing after him like chicks after their mother. A hand slapped down on Lorenzo's right shoulder, and the sergeant turned to find Zale standing beside him. The rest of the squad were behind Zale, helmets locked in place, damage patched, weapons ready.
It's time to admonish our foes once more,
said Zale.
Yes, I feel the need to administer the justice of the Emperor,
growled Lorenzo. He drew his power sword and activated its glittering blade.
Let us be the blade of the angel's judgment. Praise the angel,
the others chorused, falling in behind Lorenzo as he stalked towards the front line. Soon the clatter and chatter of the breachhead was behind them, the echoing retorts of stormbolters and rebounding roars of assault cannons replaced the whir of drills and cracks of welders. In the mess of interlacing corridors, subvents, access ways and doors, it was easier to navigate by the readings of the sensorium, by what could be seen or heard. Lorenzo identified the area his squad had been ordered to secure and signaled ahead to Sergeant Adian that they were approaching. In turn, each of Lorenzo's squad replaced one of Adian's men, taking positions overlooking a wide causeway that had once been the main dorsal corridor of a ship. They did so in the midst of combat, taking up the relentless battle against the swarms of Genestealers hurling themselves at the cordon.
Keep an eye on the bulkheads to the right,
warned Adian, as Lorenzo joined him. The sergeant loosed off a quick burst of fire at a Genestealer clambering from a subduct, before pointing to a wall some 30 meters away, heavily dented from the other side.
They've tried to break through 3 times already. I've used the flame to burn them out. I can't say how much longer those bulkheads will hold. Affirmative,
said Lorenzo, adding his own fire to that of Adian. Lorenzo checked that his warriors were in position and gave Adian a reassuring thump on the arm with the hilt of his sword.
The area is secure. You can break off now. The chapter shall honor your deeds. The angels stand watch,
Adian said in reply, before backing away down the corridor, firing a passing salvo at the enemy. Mission time post-impact 14 minutes 52 seconds. Lorenzo divided his attention between firing his weapon, monitoring the enemy's movements on the sensorium, and listening to the mission updates from the comms. The analysis of the CAT data was complete, and Captain Raphael had outlined the situation. The gene stealers, more than 40,000 of them, were in a dormant state, hidden in a cluster roughly 1 kilometer from the landing zone. The ship in which they had made their lair seemed relatively intact, sealed from the vacuum and with minimal life support functions still operating. The same systems that maintained a modicum of temperature and atmosphere for the gene stealers to survive could also prove to be their death. It was the captain's intent to use the air circulation system to poison the aliens as they hibernated. More tech marines had arrived from the strike cruiser with tanks of lethal gas. Small-scale tests were being conducted at another point on the perimeter to determine the concentration of toxin required to kill the gene stealers.
If they're dormant, why don't we go in and slaughter them before they wake up?
Asked Zale.
One big push could wipe them out. These delays give them more time to rise and gather their numbers.
That's what we thought last time,
Lorenzo replied quietly.
At first, it was just as you say. We slaughtered hundreds of them. Our attack caused some change, a shift in their behavior. Each one that fell seemed to trigger the waking of 10 more. They responded quickly, thousands of them emerging from their stasis within seconds. They surrounded us in minutes.
Lorenzo did not have to continue. All present knew the rest of the tale. A shameful day in the Blood Angels' otherwise glorious history.
Today the debt from that black day will be repaid,
said Zale.
We will destroy this loathsome foe and restore our pride. The angel wills it,
said Valencio.
Praise Lord Sanguinius.
They fought on without further word for some time, each Terminator concentrating his efforts on killing the enemy. Gunfire reverberated constantly along the hallway, and the corpses piled upon the concourse now numbered several hundred. Then, as if some unseen hand had closed the door or shut off a tap, the attack suddenly stopped. The silence that descended was more unnerving than the riotous clamour of battle, and Lorenzo steadied himself with the thoughts of his Primarch and the chapter.
Synchronize your sensorium data with Omnio.
Gideon's voice drifted over the comm.
He's noticed something important.
Lorenzo adjusted his sensorium to receive data over the inter-squad comm. This had the effect of increasing its range at the expense of clarity. There were 2 patches of green fog, clusters of indistinct contacts. Both were growing. One 150 meters ahead, the other some 70 meters to the right flank.
There has been a pattern in the attacks,
Omnio explained.
They have been working systematically along the perimeter, seeking weak points. I believe they were attacking to judge our firepower and numbers, learning from our tactics and responses.
And now?
Asked Lorenzo.
That sounds very sophisticated,
Dano said, doubt in his voice.
My observations are accurate,
said Omnio.
The next attack will be from 2 directions simultaneously, at the point between our curtains of fire.
Flashing red icons highlighted a route through the corridors that would cut between the 2 squads with the minimum of exposure to the guns of the Terminators. The second attack would encircle Gideon and his men.
We have to close the gap,
said Gideon.
We cannot allow them to break through.
That will leave you vulnerable on your right,
Lorenzo pointed out, studying the schematic.
Yes,
said Gideon.
Very well,
said Lorenzo.
Dano and Zale, move to the right and close off that path. Valencio, take Dano's place on point.
Gideon was reorganizing his squad's dispositions as well. The attack came before they were fully in position. Dozens of gene stealers raced forward, the smudges of green splitting into separate contacts on the sensorium as the range closed. Zale used his flamer to close off a side tunnel. Dano joined his fire with that of Scipio from Gideon's squad, creating a crossfire in one of the rooms that gene stealers now had to pass through. Zale moved forward with the cleansing fire of his weapon, like shutting a lid on a box. Gideon's squad was hard pressed on the right, the aliens coming within only a few meters before revealing themselves. The sergeant's icon was at the forefront of the battle, and Lorenzo could imagine Gideon standing firm with Storm Shield and Thunderhammer, protecting his men. Lorenzo fought the urge to move across and aid his battle brother. The line had to be held. he whispered a benediction to the angel on behalf of Gideon and his men, and turned his attention back to the dark corridor ahead. Mission time post-impact. 13 minutes, 88 seconds. The Genestealer attack was in full force. Multiple swarms of the creatures came at the Terminators from different directions, splitting them, dividing their attentions. From the reports over the comm, Gideon knew that Space Marine casualties were mounting.
Defensive posture is weakening,
Announced Captain Raphael.
Tech Marine analysis of toxin effect complete. Now we attack. All squads converge on primary hibernation site for final extermination. The scene of our reprisal is set. We are the Avengers. Nemesis.
Finally, growled Leon. He unleashed a furious burst of fire from his assault cannon, clearing a junction ahead and stomped forwards eagerly.
Purge the Xenos,
Said Gideon, moving up behind Leon.
Blood Angels, the time of our retribution is nigh.
Breachhead infiltrated.
Captain Raphael warned over the command channel.
Brothers Aletio and Canavoro are compromised. Gideon and Lorenzo, fix on their beacon signals. Now transmitting their suit frequencies. Insufficient time for rescue. Establish viability of missing brethren. Destroy if necessary. Protect our gene seed.
Affirmative,
Said Gideon, feeling suddenly deflated. The signal came through on the sensorium. 2 red blips pulsed roughly 300 meters away.
Signal received. Moving out.
Prayers of vengeance steal our souls.
Said Raphael, and then he was gone.
Lorenzo, take the signal at grid 18 Kappa.
Said Gideon.
We shall deal with the signal at 20 Kappa. Affirmative. Moving alongside your advance.
Replied Lorenzo. Leon was at a cross junction, firing to the left. Gideon moved behind him and took up a defensive stance to the right. As Scipio pressed on between them, a line of Genestealers emerged up a ramp in front of the sergeant.
Suffer the wrath of the Blood Angels,
He bellowed, stepping forward to meet their charge. Swinging his hammer, he smashed aside the first of the Genestealers, its shattered body crashing into the metal wall of the narrow corridor. A second alien leapt towards Gideon, and he brought up his shield. Lightning arced along the creature's outstretched claws as it struck, sending the creature into a spasm. Gideon barely brought his shield around to warn away another Genestealer attacking from his right, shifting his bulky armor into the tight space. Gideon brought his hammer down onto the head of the stunned creature. Another was on him in moments, slashing at his abdomen, its diamond-hard claws raking strips of metal and splinters of ceramite. Gideon used the edge of his shield as a weapon, bringing it down onto the ridged nodules of the chitin protecting the creature's neck. There was a snap, and the Genestealer wilted to the floor. A flurry of detonations ahead cut apart 2 more Genestealers, and Omnio came into view from a side passage, his Stormbolter blazing.
flank secured,
Omnio announced, turning his weapon towards the ramp and unleashing another salvo. Gideon slewed his armor 180 degrees and marched back to the junction, before turning right and following Scipio's path. Leon advanced along a parallel course, the intermittent roar of the assault cannon echoing from ahead of Gideon. As usual, Noctis brought up the rear, quiet and dependable. Noctis fired off a burst from his Stormbolter at the Genestealers circling behind the squad, retreating a few steps when the opportunity allowed. Gideon slowed his own progress, allowing Noctis to catch up. No one would be left isolated this time. A yellow glare ahead announced the arrival of Brother Zale from Squad Lorenzo. Flames flickered through the tunnel, searing through a cluster of Genestealers that had leapt from an overhead gantry to land behind Scipio. The aliens writhed in the flames for a second or two, and then collapsed into smouldering heaps as the inferno dissipated. Patches of burning promedium scarred the walls and floor. Gideon ignored them and pushed through the dying fires to keep pace with Scipio, who was now 20 meters ahead.
Room 30 meters to the right,
Said Gideon.
Noctis, cover the approach.
Understood,
Replied Noctis as he peeled away from the main corridor. Mission time post-impact 14 minutes 62 seconds. The sensorium showed a steady stream of Genestealers approaching the 2 squads from ahead and behind. Noctis raised a hand in greeting as he saw Zale pass the junction in front of him.
"They'll no sooner pass me than the gates of Val,"
said Zale as he disappeared into the gloom. Noctis said nothing. The corridor ahead was blocked by several doors like airlocks. Blips on the sensorium showed that Genestealers were lurking close by. Noctis opened fire on the closest door, blasting it into pieces. 3 Genestealers turned towards the Terminator, surprised. He fired calmly, gunning down all 3 in 2 short bursts. His heavy footfalls reverberating along the corridor, Noctis advanced resolutely, firing at the next door. Another Genestealer was revealed by the door's demise, and it suffered the same fate as the others, its blood spattering across a riveted bulkhead. 2 more doors later, and Noctis finally reached the room to which he had been assigned. It was a loading bay of some kind, the mangled remnants of cranes and lifters, angled madly in the shadows above. Huge blast doors had been burst inwards by the impact of another vessel at some immeasurably distant time in the past, and an outcrop of crenulated balcony punctured the doorway. Genestealers leapt over the parapet to the floor of the bay, landing sure-footedly and springing towards Noctis without hesitation. Noctis fired dispassionately, regarding the aliens sprinting towards him as nothing more than moving targets. He paced his fire, unleashing rounds in sensible double bursts so as not to jam the mechanism of the Stormbolter. When he was down to his last few rounds, he turned his fire upon the balcony, gunning down the Genestealers perched on the wall. Having given himself a couple of seconds' grace with this act, he ejected the empty magazine and slammed in another. The Terminator locked the stabilizing bars in his knees of his armor and settled into a solid firing posture. He began to hum quietly as he fired, the hymn of the Angel Resurgent. He kept the beat with the crack of his bolt rounds. He wasn't going anywhere for a while. Mission time post-impact, 15 minutes, 3 seconds. Some form of automatic response had sealed all the doors in this part of the ship. Perhaps the hull had been breached and integrity had been lost, or maybe the ship had come under attack. Whatever the cause, the sealed doors were proving problematic. Line of sight was only a few meters in each direction, and Lorenzo was forced to take the lead. His power sword a surer defense than his squad's power fists against the Genestealer ambushes. Rents in his armor and caked gore bore testament to the fury of those encounters. The pulsing icon of Brother Orletio's signal was a few meters ahead. It was surrounded by enemy contact signals. Lorenzo leveled his Stormbelter at the door and fired, its rusting frame exploding over the fuselage. The rapid-fire buzz of Leon's assault cannon sounded somewhere to the right, close to Cannavaro's ident signal. 6 Genestealers poured from the room. First was thrown back by Lorenzo's opening salvo, the alien behind deftly leaping over its tattered corpse. Lorenzo pulled the trigger to let loose another barrage of destruction, but only a single bolt fired before his weapon jammed. The shell took the Genestealer high in the chest, knocking it sideways. It staggered to its feet, fanged maw open.
"I am the blade of Sanguinius,"
Lorenzo cried, charging forwards. His power sword cleaved the head of the Genestealer from its body. Another alien took its place, claws smashing into Lorenzo's left shoulder as it pounced. The sergeant thrust upwards, lancing his sword through the creature's exposed throat. The Genestealer twisted as it fell, dragging Lorenzo's arm to one side, the power sword trapped between its vertebrae.
"Clear for fire!"
shouted Dano. Lorenzo ripped free his sword and hurled himself backwards into a narrow side corridor, smashing against the wall. Bolts screamed past where the sergeant had been a moment before, and droplets of thick blood splattered the passageway.
"Behead and secure,"
ordered Lorenzo as he righted himself. Dano advanced past and Lorenzo fell in behind. Upon entering the room at the end of the passageway, Dano stopped suddenly.
"Emperor's mercy,"
the normally cool Terminator muttered. Lorenzo moved into the room, stepping past Dano. Scraps of red armor littered the chamber, and a severed servo arm twitched in one corner, gouging a furrow into a tile on the floor. Orletio sat with his back propped against the wall. His armor had been stripped away in many places, and blood trickled from a gash across his face. It was not the injury to the tech marine that had caused Dano such dismay. It was the rest of his appearance. Lorenzo could see that the Techmarine's flesh had a bluish tint to it. Orletio's skin was pocked with legions, and oddly shaped protuberances swelled underneath his pale skin. His veins were like thick cords across his arms and neck, and his face was distorted. His eyes bulged and ridges were breaking through the skin of his brow. A lone fang punctured his upper lip, curving up towards his nose. There was intelligence in Orletio's eyes, and terror. It was something Lorenzo had never seen in the eyes of another space marine. Orletio weakly raised an arm and groaned. Yellowish ichor oozed from his wounds, mixed with thick blood.
Target 1 located,
Lorenzo broadcast.
Viability negative. Same here,
replied Gideon from the location of the other downed Techmarine. His voice choked, his usual attention to comm protocol forgotten.
Aggressive genetic mutation,
Omnio told them. His voice was measured and quiet.
The gene stealer's usual breeding function is to use an ovipositor to implant its seed within a victim, and this is passed on to the implantee's progeny. Space Marines do not follow the normal reproductive cycle. I would theorize that the implanted genetic material is reacting unpredictably with the Astartes modifications. Projection. Damage is permanent and irreversible. Suggest immediate destruction to avoid danger of contamination.
Zale, I need you up here now,
Lorenzo bellowed, his anger fueled by distaste. Gene Stealers were still attacking from several directions, and Lorenzo forced himself to focus on the mission.
Valencio, stand guard at rear station. Dano, push through and link up with Gideon. Affirmative,
replied Dano, moving out of the room through another doorway.
I shall protect,
said Valencio, the thump of his footfalls receding into the corridors.
En route,
Zale announced. Lorenzo turned his eyes away from Orletio's and span on the spot to stand over watch on the corridor Zale would be using. It made no difference. The Techmarine's plaintive stare still hovered in the sergeant's mind. Lorenzo remembered that his gun was still jammed and worked to clear the mechanism, dragging his thoughts back to the ongoing combat. A pair of Gene Stealers appeared at the far end of the corridor as Lorenzo ejected the Stormbolter's magazine. The sergeant smacked home a fresh clip of shells and opened fire, glad of the release. It had been shame of the Blood Angel's past defeat that had driven on Lorenzo. Now a cold hatred filled him, far sharper and more motivating than any feeling of historical guilt. More Gene Stealers boiled up from the deck below. Lorenzo fired long bursts from his Stormbolter at the Gene Stealers converged on the room, the anger welling up inside him, threatening to break through. Lorenzo resisted the urge to charge forward and administer revenge with his power sword, though every cell of his body screamed at him to let go of his discipline and indulge the bloodthirst that lurks beneath the skin of every Blood Angel. A wave of incinerating fury from behind the knot of Gene Stealers announced Zale's arrival, and Lorenzo barely managed to check his fire. The sergeant stepped out of the room and into the side passage in which he had sheltered before, allowing Zale to pass.
Cleanse and burn,
Lorenzo said, not looking back into the room, not wishing to see its awful contents again. He stood guard behind Zale as the Terminator reached the door.
Cleanse and burn,
roared Zale as his flamer poured purifying fire into the chamber, reducing Orletio's remains to a charred heap within seconds.
Go to the Angel and be proud of your sacrifice, Brother Orletio. You will be received with glory and forgiveness.
The drawn-out rattle of an assault cannon from the other side of the deck followed shortly after.
Objective terminated,
Gideon grimly announced on the comm.
Objective terminated,
replied Lorenzo, his voice quivering with rage.
Now, let us join the attack.
Mission time post-impact 15 minutes 55 seconds. At the heart of the Space Hulk, the creature that had newly surfaced to sentience flexed sinews and muscles that had been immobile for centuries. As strength returned to its body, so too did numbers of the brood swell. More and more of its progeny awoke, spurred into consciousness by the imperative of the brood mind. It felt their presence and opened its eyes, recognizing itself for the first time, understanding its purpose. Brood Lord. In the gloom, thousands of eyes glittered in the light from the false stars far above. The prey had been goaded into action and came closer. Hundreds of the brood perished as the red-skinned hunters advanced. It did not matter. They existed to die for the life of their brood. Not in this place would it lurk. The others of its kind needed space to awaken. Its brood presence suppressed their stirring minds. Unfolding powerful limbs, stretching thawing sinews, the brood lord raised itself to its feet, towering above its progeny. Old recollections of dens and lairs, tunnels and pathways flickered into its memory. These were its hunting grounds. It knew their tangled web in every detail. Still stiff from anabiosis, the creature stalked slowly across the chamber, its brood parting before it. Craning its neck to loosen tight fibers, extending joints long frozen by stasis, it compelled the brood to follow. It ducked into a hole rent into the wall and dropped to the ground below, its claws ringing on the metal deck. Ahead lay a warren of tunnels where it would strike. In the dark, the brood would wait. Their time was coming soon. Mission time post-impact 18 minutes 29 seconds. There was little chatter between the members of Squad Lorenzo and Gideon, the veteran warriors disturbed by what had become of the captured tech marines. Only the occasional muttered devotional broke the comm silence as the two sergeants led their men back through the Space Hulk towards the main Blood Angels force.
Lorenzo and Gideon, this is Raphael.
The captain's voice broke through the quiet.
We are locating suitable target points for release of toxins. Expecting high resistance. We have to thin the numbers of the enemy. You have a new mission. I need you to perform a diversionary tactic. There is a secondary cluster of inactive life signals near to your position, at grid 4 theta. Destroy the dormant gene stealers and trigger a counterattack from the main group.
Affirmative,
said Lorenzo, and Gideon gave a similar acknowledgement.
Our moment of retribution approaches,
said Raphael.
In the angel's eyes we shall know victory,
replied Gideon. The objective was clear on the sensorium, a mass of low-grade signals roughly 200 meters away. Lorenzo detailed the squad into an attack formation and took a position into the middle of the group, ready to move forward to bolster the attack or fall back to defend the rear.
Zale, your heavy flamer will be best suited to the annihilation of the incubating gene stealers,
said Lorenzo.
Conserve as much ammunition as possible en route. Same for you, Leon, said Gideon. Don't get carried away.
There were grunts of disappointed consent from both Space Marines.
What about this counterattack?
Asked Omnio.
Direction? Strength? Strength unknown. But I've been studying the schematic,
said Scipio.
There's a long concourse that runs the length of the freight wreck, where the main concentration is located. It comes up through what seems to be a series of collapsed elevator shafts. If we can gain the advantage of position, we should be able to cut them down as they emerge.
Good, said Lorenzo.
We don't have time to destroy the dormants and then get to the defensive position. We'll set up a perimeter while you annihilate the target. Understood,
said Gideon.
We'll reinforce as soon as the mission is completed. Let the Emperor spread our hatred of the foe. In his name we smite the unclean,
replied Lorenzo. The two squads took diverging courses through the bowels of the old warship's gun batteries. Some distant reactor still trickled out a fitful stream of energy, and red lights flickered overhead. great arched windows of reinforced ferroglass were smashed and distorted, revealing a ruddy view of the tortured innards of another vessel. While Gideon and his warriors cut into the depths of the frigate's interior, Lorenzo led his squad to the left through immense shadows cast by misshapen, corroded guns. The war engines of an age gone past were encased in crumbling bunkers of masonry, rusted supports jutting from the cracked and flaking rockcrete. Magazines where shells the size of tanks had once been stored were now chambers filled with dunes of oxidized metal and inert grey propellant. The Terminators waded thigh-deep through these artificial drifts, alert for danger, their attention never wavering from the telltale displays of the sensorium. Perhaps stirring into life by the nearing presence of the Terminators, a few of the lifeforms on the scanner surged into activity. Their signals brightened and began to move. They did not come straight at the Space Marines as they had done in the first minutes of the battle. They coalesced into small groups, and then the groups drifted together, gathering their strength.
"Why don't they attack?"
asked Valencio.
"Would you?"
replied Dano. Valencio thought about this for a moment.
"No,"
he conceded.
"But I'm not an animal. I have reason and experience that tells me that attacking piecemeal is doomed to failure. These things have just woken. They cannot know what we are." "They learn right enough,"
growled Lorenzo. He shouldered open a door, the old metal screeching and disintegrating under the weight of his armor. Beyond lay a black corridor with doorless archways every few meters.
"Those that survived learned from the deaths of the others. They changed and adapted quickly. Quicker than we could." "Psychic,"
said Valencio.
"Very likely,"
Lorenzo said, pausing beside the nearest arch and turning his suit to direct its lamps into the darkness. The cones of light revealed seized gears and broken chains with lengths larger than Space Marines. The ceiling was lost in shadows, the ancient mechanism concealed hundreds of meters above. Lorenzo turned his back to the main corridor.
"It does not matter how they do it. We must be ready, whatever their tactics. Victory is the reward of the vigilant,"
said Zale. Footfalls muffled, their lights swallowed by the vastness of the gallery. The squad moved on towards the elevator shafts. Mission time post-impact 19 minutes 14 seconds.
"Just like target,"
began Leon, but Scipio cut across him.
"Don't say it," he hissed. "You said that about the orcs and I lost a leg. Look, there's movement on the sensorium. Weapons check,"
ordered Gideon, pressing the stud of his thunderhammer. Its heavy head glowed from within, sheathing the weapon with a blue aura. A test of his storm shield's power supply had equal success. Around him, the squad calibrated targeter links and checked magazines. Leon brought the rotating barrels of his assault cannon up to full speed and loosed off a short burst of fire at a pile of leaking barrels at the far end of the passageway. They disintegrated into metal splinters and puddles of thick fluid.
"Combat ready,"
Leon reported, echoed by the other squad members. The Genestealer's nest was barely 20 meters away, across a narrow aqueduct-like bridge, with raised sides and a channel along its length, through which trickled a thick green slime. The sensorium showed a concentration of more than 30 of the creatures just ahead, in a condensed mass of crushed rooms and contorted corridors.
"Quick, across the bridge,"
said Gideon, waving Scipio forward. It was a sturdy structure, its plascrete piles covered with strange black moss, but showing no damage. The gap below was shrouded in darkness, and sensorium readings showed the drop to be approximately 15 meters. Suspension cables creaked and groaned as the squad moved onto the bridge.
"There's something wrong with my sensorium link,"
said Omnio.
"Brother Sergeant, I'm getting false readings." "Mine also,"
said Leon. Gideon checked his own sensorium and saw registered lifeforms barely 10 meters away. That would put them on the bridge.
"Overhead!"
shouted Scipio, turning and firing above the heads of the squad. A four-armed body plummeted from the shadows of the bridge suspension towers, trailing blood. Gideon locked up as best as his armor would allow and saw more shapes crawling across the ceiling and dropping onto the support pillars.
"Spread out! Cover each other!"
he shouted, raising his storm shield as a Genestealer leapt the gap from pylon to bridge, landing a meter in front of the sergeant. He smashed the creature from the aqueduct with a backhanded swipe of his hammer, just as another Genestealer landed behind him. Armor feedback warnings flashed red in his display as it gouged a long furrow through the back of his left leg. Turning awkwardly, he desperately fended off its next attack with his shield. All around, more aliens were dropping onto the bridge. The Terminators struggled to raise their weapons to the required elevation, and were forced to resort to shooting their foes at hand-to-hand range and blasting the Genestealers from each other's backs. The Genestealers swarmed along the bridge, cornering the squad from the front, left, and right. Scipio smashed the creature to a pulp with a single blow from his power fist. Leon was cursing constantly, unable to use his assault cannon at such close quarters. The ammunition pack on Omnio's belt exploded, hurling a Genestealer out into the void with a blossom of flame, Omnio lurching in the opposite direction. He stumbled against the retaining wall, the impact of his heavy suit crumbling the ancient plascrete. As he righted himself, a Genestealer landed on his shoulder and the wall turned to dust under the weight, sending the two of them sprawling into the shadows. Omnio's lamp scanned crazily in the darkness, tumbling for a moment, and then going dark. Omnio! Gideon bellowed, shoulder charging a Genestealer, his momentum lifting the alien off its feet and throwing it over the edge of the bridge.
Suit compromised. Occupant intact.
Omnio replied, his voice calm and clear.
Fell on some wreckage. Lamps damage. System support integrity at 80%. Power couplings intermittent to left arm and sensorium. Something is punctured my lower back. Injury not critical. Enemy... squashed.
The sensorium was showing blips all around the squad. So close, Gideon could not tell if they were above, below, or right in front of him. Scipio had pushed through to the end of the bridge and was standing overwatch. There were a few more Genestealers still on the bridge, wreaking havoc.
Can you see if there's anything else down there with you?
Gideon asked. He moved forwards, sweeping aside a Genestealer clinging onto Noctis's Stormbelter arm. Noctis gave a nod of thanks and took up position back-to-back with Scipio. His disciplined fire strafed across the bridge supports, the bodies of more Genestealers tumbling into the darkness amidst the bolt detonations. Crunches of powdering plascrete and groans of grinding metal echoed from below as Omnio pushed himself to his feet. A fitful light announced his location, intermittently strobing across the tangle of fallen pylons and cables from another bridge that had once run alongside the aqueduct.
Nothing on infrared,
Omnio reported.
Power unstable. Hard to walk. Going comm silent to reroute power to sensorium. I'll meet you at the nest. Affirmative, Omnio,
replied Gideon. He glanced around and saw that the bridge was now clear of enemies.
The angel watches you in the darkness. You too,
said Omnio, and then his link turned to static. The constant fire from Scipio demonstrated that more and more Genestealers were awakening. However, the attack was having an effect. Captain Raphael spoke on the comm.
Genestealer force breaking away from main concentration,
he announced.
Good work, Gideon. Lorenzo, prepare for engagement. Estimate 2,000 hostiles. No friendly forces in your area. Purge with freedom.
Affirmative,
said Lorenzo.
Our vengeance shall be written in the blood of the foe.
There was a hiss as Lorenzo changed channel to the inter-squad frequency.
Gideon, request termination of target with utmost haste. Affirmative,
said Gideon.
We'll be as quick as we can. Hold on and watch our backs. We will not fail,
Lorenzo assured his battle brothers. Mission time post-impact 20 minutes 99 seconds. Its progeny fought and died. Under its urging, they had amassed their numbers. Now they attacked in force, seeking to overwhelm the armored hunters. Fire and explosions filled the metal hole the brood were using to approach their prey. Many fell, but more were coming. The brood mind pulsed and grew, and the creature could feel its powers reaching their zenith. It sensed the minds of the hunters, beyond the throbbing instinct of the brood, their spirits armored like their bodies. Meaningless chatter filled their thoughts, but through the core of their beings blazed a harsh light, encasing their souls and protecting them. It probed harder, seeking a weakness. Their anger and their hatred were powerful, concepts it knew of only from others of their kind who had come before. Concepts like fear and horror. The prey that had come before had been weak. These were strong. It would need to look upon them to break their barriers. Gathering a bodyguard of gene stealers about itself, the Broodlord began to ascend the shaft, clawing its way up the metal walls. More fire engulfed those ahead, their burning corpses dropping past into the depths. It climbed swiftly, urging on the brood to swarm forwards. It laid its eyes upon the first of them, the fire breather. The prey paused for a moment, the reflective lenses of its eyes fixing on the Broodlord. The moment of its hesitation was all the Broodlord needed to extend the will of the broodmind and touch upon the mind of its victim. The hunter fought for a moment, struggling against the alien will invading its thoughts. Rather than succumb to the psychic suggestion, its brain shut out all thought and the armored creature fell into a coma, collapsing heavily to the ground. The Broodlord considered this impassively. The creatures would not be controlled, but they could be rendered vulnerable. As more of the flaming projectile grubs bit at its flesh, the Broodlord turned its gaze upon the next victim.